Hey everybody, it's Friday, February the 23rd, 2024, and this is How to Restart a Church, a spin-off podcast where I, Pastor Trey Comstock, and my dear friend and colleague, Pastor Emily Larson, talk about how to make church happen, or how to make church happen again. This week, admittedly a week late, but that's because we had a really cool guest last week scheduled months in advance, and I didn't know I wanted to talk about the Super Bowl until I was watching the Super Bowl. And I don't actually want to talk about the Super Bowl other than the Taylor Swifts won the Super Bowl, because the man that normally throws balls to Taylor Swift's boyfriend threw it to somebody else at the last second and they won. And I, as I talked about on last week's show, had a whole chant related to Taylor Swift going, cut to Taylor. But that's not actually what I want to talk about. What I want to talk about is the He Gets Us ads. So, yes. For those of you who did not watch the Super Bowl, which statistically is not many of you, because the viewership was like 123. They set a Super Bowl record, I think, thanks to Taylor Swift of it all. So yes, there were two advertisements from the He Gets Us folks. Which we'll talk about a little bit of who they are in a second. But one was about like how Jesus loves the outsider and the forgotten. And the one that sparked the more kind of response is one of different shots of different unlikely pairings of people washing feet. And so one was like a priest and some representation of a queer person. So the priest was watching the queer person's feet. One was like a abortion protester washing the feet of a young mother seeking an abortion. You know this because it's set in an abortion clinic.
The police officer washing the feet of a black man. And so a lot of different.
And so, like, he didn't hate, he washed feet. And that seemed to be the one that got the most response in my Twitter feed, partly because, we're in a weird place. The internet is a weird place with feet. And so that was, yeah. So anyways, this is the second year in a row where we've had these Super Bowl ads. And so I want to talk a little bit about like how these come about. And so these ads are made by an organization called Come Near. And the idea behind Come Near and behind these ads and behind the money behind these ads is quite literally to rebrand Jesus. A lot of the money behind these ads are from the Green family. So the Green family are the owners of Hobby Lobby, and they have leveraged their estimated $15 billion fortune to do a lot of faith-based things from their perspective. They put a lot of money into sharing the gospel internationally. They put a lot of money into getting Bibles into places where often Bibles are difficult to get, translating into other languages, these kinds of things. They've put a lot of money and have a Supreme Court decision about their perspective on religion and birth control. And so I don't want to make this about that, just to kind of put them in context. And then they've also put a lot of the money into Come Near and the He Gets Us ads, quite literally. And this was one of them talking on a podcast, talking about that, like, Christianity and Christians have become associated as haters. And this is his words, not mine. He wanting these ads to show a different perspective on Christianity, and not as haters, that Jesus is all about love and about unity and about bringing us together across divisions. And again, by the way, these are all things that are true about Jesus. Right. Jesus did not practice hate. Jesus did wash feet.
Yeah. And Jesus does get us, right? He gets us.
Yes.
That message is true.
as just a like interesting pithy way to talk about Jesus, this is far from the worst attempt I've ever found, and there's an earnestness with it and a like showing of Jesus' ability to cross very political boundaries. And these are things that we often lose in talking about scripture, that I spend a lot of my life trying to bring back into scripture. It's my obsession with the Roman Empire. We have to talk about it because, like, to understand Jesus in context, you have to understand the politics of that era of the Roman Empire. I get all of that. Now, I will add a little bit of, it is interesting that the Greens are talking about this. I think a lot of secular folks would look at the Greens and the other work that they do, particularly around their perspectives on LGBTQ inclusion in public life and their perspectives around various reproductive issues, and go, yeah, well, the Greens might, to some people's mind, be why we're thought about as haters. This is not the show for this. And so I offer no perspective other than that is certainly part of the reaction to these ads. I have the Rolling Stone piece pulled up here, right? The Rolling Stone piece is entitled, "This Evangelical Billionaire Family Wants to Convert You on Super Bowl Sunday," right? Like the Greens become this coming from the Greens becomes part of the story. But I don't think that's the most interesting angle for us to talk about. I think the most interesting angle for us to talk about is this working? And why I bring this up is, so weirdly, Emily, and we talked about this before the show, and this is why I know this, your and my social media feeds could almost not be more different.
Correct.
I am a holdout in the artist formerly known as Twitter, where I run in largely secular video game circles of a more progressive bend. And so
mine is more of the Facebook world of homesteading moms and families and people who make sourdough bread, right?
Right.
So this is much more a conservative crowd.
Right. And so yours is more of a conservative faith-based crowd, and my social media world is very more progressive and very secular. And they both disliked this ad for the same reason. Not only do they agree, they both disliked this ad for the same reason. So I will narrate this for you. It's Monday evening. Last Monday evening, we've just finished a lovely interview with Todd Bolsinger, and then I spent 2 hours on Twitter. Sitting here in the studio, I spent 2 hours on Twitter reading comment after comment after comment about this ad for my incredibly secular whatever, going, they spent $14 million on this? Maybe if Jesus got us, they'd built a homeless shelter, fed the hungry, clothed people, particularly done a work of charity, because these ads cost in total for just this year $14 million. And then periodically a Christian would pipe up and go, well, actually, we're supposed to be reaching people for Jesus, which we are, and so we should probably put the message out there. And then the whole crowd, because this is Twitter and it's very mean, the whole crowd was like, shut up, fool! You could have been doing good. It was, someone did bring up, didn't Judas say that? And then everyone got mad about that, because Judas does say that, right? With the washing with the tears,
with the perfume,
right?
Yes,
with the perfume. Judas is the one. So couldn't we given that away? I was like, yeah, Judas, you would say that. And that's an interesting biblical perspective that was utterly lost on. So if the goal of this ad was aimed at like secular people who don't necessarily like us, what my Twitter feed says, which is largely secular people who don't necessarily like us, it didn't land.
Right. But on the other side of that same coin is a group of admittedly conservative people in my social media feed going, wait, imagine having $14 million to spend and you spend it on a Super Bowl ad. So it was both sides of the coin, I think, for a lot of people. So it united us.
Yeah, right.
We all had a common enemy, right?
Right. Yeah. No, that was the fascinating thing about this. And I didn't know this angle until you and I finally did a pre-show about it, because I was like, well, secular Twitter hates this. I bet conservative Facebook loves this. And you're like, no, conservative Facebook doesn't love this. And I'm like, well, the goal was to create unity, and they did.
And they did.
Secular Twitter and religious Facebook agree we shouldn't have spent $14 million on this ad.
Right.
What a world.
Insane.
And so, I take the Greens out of it for a second. I think as ways to talk about who Jesus is and was and is to come, in a way that translates into modern world, this ain't so bad. I mean, I have drawn in preaching and trying to talk about Jesus, I have, in my own work, have drawn similar analogies, right? You know, a year and a half ago, I wrote we talked about this recently, resetting the nativity in a Walmart at shift change, right? Like, this is, the content of it is not a misrepresentation of Jesus.
Right.
But also clear, not a bad commercial. I've heard some rumblings that maybe the art was AI generated, and if that's true, I've got some issues. But as they go, right, like, it's not awful, and yet, what does it mean that we spent $14 million? That we as a faith spent $14 million to do this? Or more than that, but that's just those two ads. This campaign is run all over the place, in very prominent places. This is a well-funded advertising campaign, and so this isn't the only place that he gets his stuff shown up. We've spent all of this money, and it does not seem to be changing the narrative. And in some ways plays into a narrative that people are seizing, like, they've traced the money, and that starts to distract, right, from what this is trying to do. Mm-hmm. And then also, even people who are not as chronically online as I am, just sit back and go, well, gosh, that sure cost a lot of money. Couldn't we done some actual good with it? And as a chronically underfunded church trying to help people in a community, I go, yeah, dude, I could do a lot with $14 million.
I can think of the ministries that we have worked in before, and just imagining, you know, an influx of a $14 million, like how much we could have done or would have done with any sort of amount of money, not even a 14th of that, you know? But it is
okay. Yeah. So these are my actual thoughts, right? So now let's have a slightly more interesting discussion. I'll flip this around. Not that this hasn't been interesting, but like let's spice this up a little bit, right? Okay. Yeah. I could donate $14 million. I, the haver of $14 million, which I don't. I could donate that to building a homeless shelter. And that would make a splash for a community, right? But it wouldn't do as much work to rebrand Jesus for the 21st century as a Superbowl ad would. And so isn't there something gained by making a giant public splash, which is what a Superbowl ad can do? Don't we gain something by doing that, given that our real goal here is to make disciples? I think that's I'm not sitting in these meetings, but I suspect that's the logic here.
Right, that's the actual goal, I imagine.
Right, and you know, I will say that the Greens give, as I have said, they opened the show, the Greens give to a lot of causes, and they give a lot of money to a lot of causes. And so this is not the extent of their largesse on. They help to go back to their previous show. They are the money behind the recreation of the Ark. Isn't that in Kentucky?
Creation Museum, yeah.
Creation Museum. They're the money behind the Creation Museum.
Mm-hmm.
They do a lot in different Christian causes. So this is not the end. This is not the long and the short of what they've done. In some ways, these Super Bowl ads are just dropping the bucket. Again, they spent $500 million on the Creation Museum. So this isn't it, but like, so this is this to me is the question at the heart of this is, do we gain something by doing that public splash, that attention-getting thing, rather than the real gritty work of just being really good and having people see it, take notice, and feel drawn in by it?
Right. So is it does Jesus need a rebrand? Right?
Yeah.
Like, are we, egotistical enough to think that we are the people who should do that? Or is it us, the church, that needs the rebranding? Right? Are we the ones that need to change our perspective?
Or are we just mad about cathedral spires again?
Right.
Right. Like the logic of this is the logic of the cathedral spire. Right? This is just, I think we asked ourselves, at some point we've asked ourselves, what's the 21st century version of a cathedral spire? We found it. This is the 21st century version of the cathedral spire. Mm-hmm. But this is also just the end point of all essentially attractional ministry.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so this is where it gets more complicated for me as a thought. Because you and I, cards on the table, especially in Palestine, we did
a lot of
attractional
events.
A
whole lot of it.
We did so many attractional things. We bought our own bounce house, and not like a cheapo one, like a commercial. We bought a commercial grade bounce house because we got tired of
cotton candy machine.
Yep.
We got tired of renting them.
We got tired of renting them.
Attractional events.
Right. We spent all of October running a 12-hour a day.
An inordinate amount of pumpkins were sold every single October as a big venue, as a big attractional event.
Right. And this is not perfectly equivalent because the whole point of the pumpkin patch was so that the attractional thing would pay for itself because we were not made of money. And so we couldn't throw money at a problem. And also, that church specifically needed to alter the community story around it. And so it's not, but again, so in some ways, like we were doing a work of rebranding to change to essentially show what that church is not who we are now. And maybe you'll feel better about who we are now. And even if you don't, please buy a pumpkin or take some pictures here, or just know that, we care about you, even if all you ever do is show up for the candy, we don't care. It was a little different. Frankly, we offered something more than just, here are some words about Jesus that you were going to watch until Taylor Swift comes back on screen. But hey, you want to just some free candy and have a good time? Cool. Come on down. It's all right. It's a little different, but it's still, we spent a huge amount of our lives doing attractional events.
Yep.
And that is not an entire order of logic different from spending $14 million because, the most expensive thing at that church was your and my time. And what did we spend so much of our time doing? But, in some ways, a small town version of a Super Bowl ad.
Very true. Very true. And so, and I mean, how many of us have a story about how we came to church for the first time because of some event, some potluck, some pool party, some youth event, some whatever, some pumpkin patch, because those attractional models work sometimes too. So
it's interesting, right? I've thought a lot about it, and I do, because I thought a lot about it in part because we spent so much of our lives doing it, right? It was just, it was one of the major major organizing factors of our lives, multiple months a year. And, I thought about a lot, like, what is the purpose of all this? And what does it accomplish? So one of the things for the model that we used was you're going to show up to this event, maybe just because you like candy, and you will get candy, and you will have a good time. And I know that that's you experiencing the love of God, even for that hour or however long you're here. And then you'll go home and maybe never darken our doors again until our next attractional thing. And I made peace with that whole idea because it was, well, you had a good hour here. And I know theologically that's you encountering, at least there, encountering the love of God. And even if that's the only context in which you interact with us again, okay, that's fine, because we're just doing this in part because we love you. And if we're just a church that's very publicly loving, maybe that means that folks will, want to stay. Or maybe it just means that one of the ministries that we do is that we create a really fun, safe space on Halloween night for families. With very, everyone got a flyer inviting them to some stuff, but that was the extent of the overtly religious whatever. Was, hey, here's a flyer, some stuff. If this feels like home to you, please consider making it your home. But that was kind of it.
Again.
It
was kind of the equivalent of handing out your business card. It's not even,
Wait, but also showing that maybe why your business card might be cool. Right. It was trying for us to wear on our sleeves. These are the vibes of our congregation. And if you are the kind of person who is wondering, is there a congregation in this town for you? Here are our vibes. Do you like our vibes? Cool. Do you not like our vibes? That cool too. There are a lot of churches even in that small town, a lot of churches, a lot of vibes. Go with God, fellow traveler, right? Mm-hmm. And so to me, also for that town specifically, there was not often a lot going on.
Right.
And we could create a fun space that just makes that town more livable for people. And so that was for me, in that context specifically, where I landed. Of did we get church members out of it? Yeah, but not we would have a foot traffic between all our attractional events of multiple thousand people. And, in your and my tenure, we never had more than 200 people as a part of that church, right? The math was off.
Yeah. There are much easier ways, and there's much easier ways to fundraise. There are incredibly easy ways that do not require you unloading a semi-truck full of pumpkins and nearly dying multiple times from avalanches.
I nearly died in an avalanche. Literally. I got deeply affected by a pumpkin one. It was bad. There are not PG ways to talk about the things that happen. It's bad. I love it though. But I just remember Ron Bradley, who's much larger man than I. So I was sitting on top of the pile. The pile's about to go. Ron is fully, Ron's gotta be close to 7 feet tall. He's a huge guy. Leaning with all of his strength and mass to hold back the wall so that I could get out of the way and not die in a pumpkin lanch.
Good times, good memories.
But
as far as that went, I think we did also try to make the best of it with it not just being an attractional model, but, we did some, ministry to kids with giving out books. And we did, it just became a venue for all of the other ways we could serve the community, serve small business food trucks. We could serve the community through, all of these different ways for the month of October, using this weird attraction of a pumpkin patch. Right.
But also, we were doing this deliberately to get attention.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I mean, just straight up. We were doing this to get attention. And and positive attention.
Attention to change the narrative, right?
To change the narrative. And hopefully, as we examine our own motives here, right? Hopefully we were doing this for all the right reasons of let's do something good and people will see that we did something good. We're doing something good for this town in a different way than you normally think about doing good for this town. But yeah, we also give away a couple thousand reading books a year.
Right.
You know, essentially free field trip, very cheap field trip for all the schools in the area to kind of enrich the kids and whatever, you know, get in kids' education. Venue for other local businesses, like all the other stuff that, like, in some ways, Pumpkin Patch is the prototype for a lot of what we talk about here. Of like,
Right.
how do we both like create an avenue for church survival that also lives out our values in the world, that also gives opportunity for other people to live better, that also the people will notice that maybe we're worth a darn and we care, right?
That
But
also just happens to fundraise for the big attractional event at the end of
right.
the pumpkin patch.
Right. I mean, the only reason why the fall festival was viable at all is that we can look at our board and go, yeah, we're going to make about $5,000 to $7,000. I'll give you the numbers now. We'll make between $5,000 and $7,000 a year selling pumpkins. That will take an entire month of our lives. But also, like, everyone who stepped in that pumpkin patch got an invite to the fall festival and got an invite to church on Sunday. And most of them came to the fall festival, and almost none of them came to church on Sunday. And
Right.
by the end of year one, I realized it was just going to be that way, and that's okay because of all the other things we talked about. But, and so, to me, what the He Gets Us adds is still that question of, is the thing that, yeah, it gets attention, is it getting the right attention?
Right.
And maybe I don't actually believe in that no news is bad news, right? That,
Or
like,
that all publicity is good publicity.
all publicity is good publicity. I don't know
think
about that. I
subscribe to
think the people behind the, you know, that what come near, you know, and the Greens say that, like, yeah, Christianity is not great. They think we hate the world, and I go, yeah, no, you're right about
Yeah.
you're right about that. Also, maybe we earned some of that. We like a lot of that.
So maybe we should,
And
like, do better.
and so we do. And so, like, the motivation, you know, in some ways we have that same motivation of, like, yeah, we should fix that.
Right.
We should fix that. And
By maybe being that
By
different
maybe-
side
yeah.
in, you know, our discipleship models, in our outreach models, call it what you want, but maybe we should actually do the things we preach.
That's right. I mean, in some ways, it comes back to the unintentional message of all of this. I think the Sean's put it back. You know, we were talking to Sean, the Gen Z, back in one of our really early shows, of, like, and basically what it came back to is, like, yeah, like, they really want, like, maybe the church should be good, actually. And I'm like, dog, what? Maybe
Yeah,
the
man.
church should be good. Maybe we should actually, maybe, yeah.
Yeah,
But,
man.
like, but so I guess to put it to comprehensible human language, like, maybe there isn't a fast fix here, right? That maybe, you know, in some ways this plays into Todd as well, right? You know, Todd was talking about, like, no, this is just going to keep, like, we just live here now, right? Like, there's not,
Right.
like, we're not going to rebrand Jesus and then they're going to come back, right? Some of it,
we just live here now in this adaptive state of constantly changing and adapting to people and their needs. Yep.
but also the thing that they're mad at us about are earned, or the, like, apathy, you know, for us as main lines, it's more apathy, but, like, the apathy that we have, you know, the shrug emoji that we have in, you know, we spend hundreds of millions of dollars a year on church, as United Methodist Church, right? Billions are spent on church, to elicit a giant shrug emoji from the world. And so, I don't know. I mean, again, there aren't clean answers, because, you know, I would love for this just to be the, let's dunk on this ad, or let's dunk on the Greens, or whatever. And isn't this so dumb that they spent $14 million? And it's a lot of money. But also, I get the instinct. I have
Right.
it. I can
Right.
imagine a world. Maybe part of why I needed to talk about this is I can imagine a world where this is the idea that I pitched. I can imagine that world. I don't have $14 million. So we're probably never going to find out. But I can imagine that world. I can imagine why this is Mark Driscoll deep cut. I understand why Mark Driscoll rented out a football stadium, a bad stadium for, a wildly not particularly successful Easter service. I can imagine, I can imagine that because I am often thinking like, look, like we need people to know that we exist and to know that we don't suck. Like this is
Right.
this is a thing that is on my mind often. And I would love there to be a shortcut. Yeah. I would love there to be a shortcut. But the more people we talk to and the more time we spend at this, the less convinced I am that there's a shortcut.
Right. That what it is actually going to take is real, true discipleship, real, true community building, real, true work for the kingdom of God.
Real, true work to show the community, the people around us, that we care about them in the way that Jesus cared, that we get them, right?
Yes.
In the way that Jesus gets us, right? Like
Jesus gets us.
And to be the hands and feet of Christ in that slow way that builds trust, to show that the motives are pure, that you just want to love this community, and maybe more people will glom onto a church that loves the community, but that it's gonna like to me there isn't short answers, right?
Right. It's not just more steeples and Superbowl ads. It's the long, hard work of actually building community.
If you have thoughts on restarting the church, because that's this whole thing, on these Superbowl ads, we would love to hear them. We would love to share them with others. I got it's my wife who commented, but she had finally listened to our unwords one, and what she realized is she grew up with a lot of not the fellowship ones, but she grew up Episcopalian. And so she grew up with a lot of the sanitizer and sextant and whatever. It was just like, that was just normal parlance, those unwords. But that's just because, that was the denomination she grew up in, and the world of, that she grew up in just had those words. But if you have thoughts to share, email us, thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com, thegoodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. For everything we do, the two best places to find us right now are our YouTube channel, youtube.com/servantsnow, or our Facebook page, facebook.com/servantsnow. Some version of just about everything that we do ends up in those two places. We're also on Instagram @servantsnow, TikTok @servantsnow. We have a website where a bunch of the stuff goes to. That website's in desperate need of a redesign. It's on the list for this year. I'll be the first to tell you that website needs a redesign, but it is servantsnow.org. It is kept up to date, but it is from a different century. Everything we do here in the Media Lab is made possible by a generous innovators grant by the Texas Annual Conference of the United Methodist Church. If you would like to support our work, help! Leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts. That makes a huge difference for podcasts everywhere. If you like a podcast and want them to do better, give them 5-star reviews on Apple Podcasts, because of all the algorithm magic that makes the algorithm magic go. Also, share this with people. If you think there are people in your lives who need to hear something that we have said, share this with them. That helps too. Commenting helps too, because all of that drives the artificial gods of the algorithm to help this show grow. Also, go in peace to love and serve the Lord. We'll see you next time.